I glanced at the dashboard clock. The hands had already swept to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The grocery store was a madhouse, a sea of people where shopping carts constantly collided with a grating screech. It was always like this on the day before Thanksgiving, with everyone rushing to grab last-minute items for the feast. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you going to get that ham?" a young woman asked, peering into my cart. I looked down at the beautiful honey-glazed ham, its skin glistening perfectly. I had specifically chosen it for my son, David. It was his absolute favorite dish, the one he always said tasted 100 times better than any store-bought version. "This one's mine," I said, my voice soft but resolute, shifting the ham to a safer spot in my cart. The girl pouted and moved on. My cart was already piled high with groceries, a massive 20-pound turkey, symbolizing abundance and leftovers for days, high-quality bacon to wrap around asparagus bundles, fresh cranberries and oranges for my homemade sauce, and all the fixings for a classic green bean casserole. David, his wife Jessica, and my grandson Leo, plus me for a Thanksgiving dinner for 4. I figured I'd need at least 8 side dishes to make it feel truly special. While waiting in the long checkout line, I got the first call from my daughter-in-law, Jessica. "Helen, where are you?" Her voice crackled with impatience through the phone. "Still at the grocery store, just about to check out," I replied, cradling the phone between my shoulder and ear as I loaded items onto the conveyor belt. "What's taking so long?" Leo's friend's mom already posted pictures of their dinner on Facebook. "Everyone's eating already." Jessica's voice shot up an octave. "We're starving over here waiting for you," I frowned. "Who on earth eats Thanksgiving dinner at 4 in the afternoon? I promise I'll be home to start cooking by 6, I said. "Just hurry up," she snapped, and the line went dead. I sighed and continued bagging my groceries. Ever since my husband passed away 3 years ago, I had been in charge of the Thanksgiving meal. David had a demanding job at a downtown corporation, and Jessica was the type who had never lifted a finger in the kitchen. If I didn't cook, who would prepare this family meal? After finally paying, I pushed the 2 overflowing bags of groceries toward the parking lot. The cold November wind bit at my cheeks, but my heart was warm. I pictured my grandson Leo's happy face when he'd taste his grandma's special dishes, and my steps grew lighter. However, as soon as I pulled out of the parking lot, I hit a wall of traffic. A sea of red brake lights stretched as far as the eye could see. The radio host was giving an update. "An emergency traffic alert for all drivers. We have a multi-car pileup on the Stevenson Expressway, causing severe backups on all surrounding routes. Please seek an alternate route if possible." I glanced at my navigation app. Every road was a thick, angry red. I tried calling my son to let him know, but the line was busy. The clock now read 4:30, and a knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach. Just then, my phone rang. It was Jessica. "Helen, where in the world are you now?" Her voice was sharp and piercing. "I'm stuck in traffic. There was an accident up ahead," I explained. "I might be a little late." "A little late? How late?" Jessica was practically screaming. "Do you have any idea that we're all sitting here starving, waiting for you to cook?" "David has a sensitive stomach. He can't go this long without eating." "What kind of a mother are you?" My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "There's nothing I can do about the traffic," I started to say, but she had already hung up. I took a deep breath, telling myself not to get upset with the younger generation. Jessica was a city girl, used to getting her way. She could be blunt, but I told myself her heart was in the right place. Over the next hour and a half, my phone rang 15 times. Each call was from Jessica, her tone growing more vicious with each one. "Are you doing this on purpose? Why are you dragging your feet, you old woman? You've completely ruined Thanksgiving. How did David end up with a mother like you?" My heart grew colder with each insult. When the 15th call came through, I heard David's voice on the other end. It wasn't a voice of comfort, but one of accusation. "Mom, do you have any idea the whole family is starving waiting for you?" Jessica's about to burst into tears. "Can't you have a little consideration for us?" In that moment, I felt something inside me snap. I said nothing and just ended the call. Ahead of me, the traffic finally began to inch forward, but I didn't continue in the direction of my son's house. At the next fork in the road, I flipped on my turn signal, turned the wheel, and headed in the complete opposite direction toward my old hometown of Maple Creek. Outside my car window, dusk was settling in, and a few stray snowflakes began to fall. The radio played cheerful holiday songs, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my heart. I turned it off. In the silence, memories came flooding back. 30 years ago, on a snowy night just like this one, David's father had collapsed from a sudden brain aneurysm right outside his office. David was only 8 years old at the time, and I was just 38. I became a widow overnight. My in-laws said I was bad luck, and my own family urged me to remarry, but I gritted my teeth and raised David on my own. I remember those years, working rotating shifts at the local factory, then coming home to do sewing and mending jobs on the side. To save enough money for David's education, I didn't buy a single new piece of clothing for 5 years. The year he was studying for his SATs, I survived on 4 hours of sleep a night for 3 months straight, just so I could afford to pay for his prep courses. Eventually, David got into a big state university, landed a job at a major firm, married a girl from the city, and bought a big house. I thought my hard work had finally paid off. I offered to move in with them to help with the baby and the housework. But my stay turned me into their unpaid maid. Jessica ordered me around. David turned a blind eye, and even my grandson Leo learned to shout at his grandmother. The snow on the windshield grew heavier, blurring my vision. I couldn't tell if it was the snow or my tears. The phone rang again. The screen showed David's name. I didn't answer. I just kept driving. I had been driving for years, but for the first time, the steering wheel felt both incredibly heavy and incredibly firm in my hands. My hometown, Maple Creek, was a 2-hour drive from the city. By the time I reached the town entrance, the streets were decorated with festive lights, and the sound of firecrackers popped in the distance. I parked in front of my old home, the 2-story house my husband and I had built when we got married, which had been empty for years. I stood before it, looking at the peeling paint on the front door and the faded holiday wreath still hanging there, and I suddenly laughed. I couldn't tell you how much bitterness, how much resolve, and how much relief was in that laugh. I pulled out a key I hadn't used in years, took a deep breath, and pushed open the door to my old home. As the door creaked open, I knew my life was about to have a new beginning, too. The snow fell harder, the tires making a soft, crunching sound as they rolled over the accumulating powder. I turned up the heat in the car, but it couldn't dispel the chill that was rising from the bottom of my heart. My cell phone buzzed incessantly on the passenger seat, the word David on the screen stinging my eyes. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't answer his call. The voice of the traffic reporter came from the radio. The backup on the Stevenson Expressway has now lasted for 3 hours. We advise all drivers to. I reached out and shut the radio off. The car was instantly filled with only the sound of tires on snow and my own breathing. The scenery outside the window gradually changed from towering city skyscrapers to the open fields of the countryside. In the curtain of snow, the occasional streetlights flickered like pale yellow moons, reminding me of that snowy night 30 years ago that changed my life forever. David was only 8 then. His father, on his way home after his holiday shift, had collapsed in the snow from a brain aneurysm. By the time I got the call and rushed to the hospital, his body was already cold. I remember standing at the door of the morgue, clutching David's small hand so tightly, feeling the whole world spin around me. "Mommy?" 8-year-old David had said, looking up at me. His little jacket was still damp from the snowman he'd been building in the yard. I knelt and hugged him, smelling the scent of melted snowflakes in his hair. "David," I had said, "from now on it's just the two of us." The memory fell around me, as thick and fast as the snow outside. During those years, I worked shifts at the factory, and David always had a key hanging around his neck. Sometimes, I'd come home from a night shift to find him curled up asleep by the front door, tear tracks still on his small face. My neighbor, Carol, would always say, "Helen, you're working yourself to the bone and the boy is suffering too. Why don't you?" Why don't I what? Remarry? Send David to live with his grandparents? I never considered those options. David was my son, and I was his mother. That was enough. The phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed it was my grandson, Leo. My heart softened for a moment. My finger hovered over the answer button, But in the end, I put the phone down. 10-year-old Leo was innocent in all this, but tonight I needed some time. Time that was just for me. The GPS showed I was still 40 kilometers from Maple Creek. I knew this road so well I could have driven it with my eyes closed. When I was younger, I used to bring David back to Maple Creek every month to visit his grandparents. After they passed away, I rarely came back. The old house just sat empty, with a neighbor checking on it from time to time. The car hit a pothole, and the jolt shook me out of my memories. In the rearview mirror, I saw the glint of tears in my eyes. I wiped my face and took a deep breath. After all these years, I thought I had forgotten how to cry. I remember the day David left for college. I took him to the train station in Chicago. He boarded the train without even looking back, without giving me a hug. I stood on the platform, watching the train pull away, and the tears just wouldn't stop. It was the first time he had ever been away from me, and I couldn't even get a clear look at his back. Later, he graduated, got a job, got married. With each step, he moved further and further away from me. The first time Jessica came to our house for dinner, I cooked 8 different dishes. She tasted a single bite of each and said she was full. At their wedding, I wore a dress I had saved up for 6 months to buy, only to be seated in a corner, far away from the main table. When Leo was born, I waited outside the delivery room for 6 hours. Finally, a nurse came out and told me the new mother was too tired to see visitors today. By the time I drove into Maple Creek, the snow had stopped. The streetlights in town seemed much brighter than I remembered. The shops along the main street were decorated with new holiday wreaths and red ribbons. A few kids were setting off firecrackers by the side of the road, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. My old house was at the west end of town, a 2-story home with a small yard. My husband and I had saved up and built it ourselves, brick by brick, when we got married. As I parked in front of it, my heart started to pound. The holiday wreath on the gate was from last year, its colors faded to a pale pink. I took out my key, a key that had been on my keyring for 30 years but was rarely used. When I tried to put it in the lock, I found it was rusted shut. "Who's there?" A familiar voice called out from the next yard. I turned and saw Carol, my old neighbor, standing at her door wrapped in a thick coat, holding a flashlight. "It's me, Helen," I said. The flashlight beam hit my face, and Carol gasped. "Oh my goodness, it really is you, Helen. What on earth are you doing here on Thanksgiving?" She hurried over, the flashlight beam bobbing up and down. "Why are you all by yourself? Where's David?" "It's just me." I managed a weak smile and continued to wrestle with the rusty lock. "Oh, honey, that lock has been rusted solid for years," Carol said, taking the key from me. "You just wait here, I'll get my husband, Art." A few minutes later, Art broke the lock open with a hammer. As the gate creaked open, a musty smell hit me. Carol handed me the flashlight. "The power and water are probably off in there. Why don't you just stay with us for the night?" I shook my head. "No, thank you. I just want to be by myself for a little while." Carol started to protest, but Art gently pulled her back. The old couple helped me carry my bags inside. Then Carol rushed back home and returned with a new comforter and a hot water bottle. "I'll come help you clean up first thing in the morning," she said as she left. "Just call us if you need anything." I nodded. "Thank you." I closed the door, and finally, I was alone. The flashlight beam swept across the living room, revealing furniture shrouded in white cloths, like silent ghosts. I lifted the cover off the sofa, and dust motes danced in the beam of light. As I sat down, I felt like every bone in my body was about to fall apart. The phone rang again. I pulled it out and saw 18 missed calls from David. There were also a few text messages. "Mom, where did you go? Jessica went too far, but you can't just do this. Mom, please answer the phone. We ordered takeout for Thanksgiving. Are you happy now? Where are you?" I didn't reply. I just switched the phone to silent. The flashlight beam landed on a photograph on the wall. It was a picture of the 3 of us, taken on David's 5th birthday. In the photo, his father had his arm around my shoulder, smiling from ear to ear. Little David sat between us, holding up a small cupcake. I reached out and gently touched the photo, my fingertips coming away covered in dust. A creaking sound came from upstairs, probably mice. It was only then that I realized how impulsive my decision had been. Here I was, on Thanksgiving night, alone in a house that hadn't been lived in for years, with no electricity, no water, and not even a proper bed to sleep on. But I didn't regret it one bit. I fumbled my way to the kitchen. The faucet, as expected, was dry. Luckily, I still had half a bottle of water in my car. I took a few sips, went back to the living room, and made a makeshift bed on the sofa with the comforter Carol had given me. As I lay down, my whole body ached in protest. I stared up at the dark ceiling and suddenly smiled. And as I smiled, the tears started to fall, streaming down my temples and into my hair. I, Helen Miller, 68 years old, a widow for 30 years, who had raised her son alone, helped raise her grandson, and served her daughter-in-law, had just been called a useless old woman on Thanksgiving. The phone screen lit up again. It was a text from Leo. "Grandma, where are you? I miss you." The tears flowed faster, but this time, I didn't give in. I replied, "Grandma is at the old house. I'll call you tomorrow. Happy Thanksgiving, my sweet boy." Then I turned off the phone. The sound of fireworks popped outside, and the occasional flash of light illuminated the living room. I counted silently in my head. 1, 2, 3, until the clock tower in the town center chimed 12 times. "Happy Thanksgiving, Helen," I said to myself. I was woken by the Sunday. When I opened my eyes, a golden ray of light was streaming through a gap in the curtains, right onto my face. It took me a few seconds to remember where I was in the old house in Maple Creek, lying on the living room sofa, covered with the blanket Carol had given me. The hot water bottle was cold, but I had slept surprisingly soundly through the night. I sat up, my joints cracking and popping. My 68-year-old body had spent the night on a sofa, but it didn't ache as much as I had expected. The sunlight, filtering through the grimy curtains, drew a bright line across the dusty floor. I stepped onto the floor with my bare feet, and the cold sensation woke me up completely. The phone was still on the coffee table. I hesitated for a moment before turning it on. A cascade of notification chimes immediately filled the air, 23 missed calls and 15 text messages, mostly from David, with a few from Leo. The latest one was sent half an hour ago. "Mom, where are you? You're scaring us to death." I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled open the curtains. Sunlight flooded into the room, illuminating the entire living room. Dust motes danced in the light like countless tiny sprites. I sneezed and realized my throat was parched. In the kitchen, I twisted the faucet for a long time before water finally sputtered out, rusty red at first, then slowly clearing up. I filled a glass and took a long drink. The cool water, with a slight taste of iron, slid down my throat, sweeter than any bottled water I'd ever had. There was a knock on the back door, followed by Carol's voice. "Helen, are you awake?" I opened the door to find Carol standing there, with a large tray covered by a towel. "I figured you wouldn't have anything here," she said with a smile. "I brought you some breakfast and hot water." On the tray was a bowl of hot oatmeal, a side of toast, 2 boiled eggs, and a thermos of hot coffee. My eyes immediately welled up. Now, don't cry. It's the holidays," Carol said, placing the tray on the table and deftly uncovering it. "Eat up first, and then we'll tackle this house together." As I ate my breakfast, Carol had already started cleaning as if it were her own home. "So what happened last night? Why did you suddenly show up here all by yourself? Does David know?" I shook my head and briefly explained what had happened. Carol stopped wiping the table, the rag suspended in midair. "That Jessica," she said, biting her lip. "I never did like the look of that girl. It's my fault for not raising David better," I said quietly, "letting him marry a wife like that." "Nonsense," Carol said, tossing the rag into a bucket of water. "That boy of yours is an ungrateful brat, too. He's forgotten who raised him." I didn't respond, just focused on my oatmeal. Carol sighed and continued wiping the table. "So, what are your plans now?" "I'll stay here for a few days," I said. "The old house could use a good cleaning anyway." "That's wonderful." Carol's eyes lit up. "The Senior Community Center starts its new session tomorrow. You should come sign up with me." "The Senior Center?" I looked up at her. You bet, Carol said proudly. I started last year. I'm taking a pottery class and line dancing. The director, Mr. Peterson, is so nice. He set up all these classes just for us seniors. I was about to refuse when my phone rang again. It was David. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Mom? David's voice was a mix of anxiety and anger. Where on earth are you? We've been looking for you all night. I'm at the old house in Maple Creek, I said calmly. What? What are you doing there during the holidays? David's voice rose. Do you know how worried we were? I could hear Jessica shouting something in the background, and then David lowered his voice. Mom, Jessica knows she was wrong. Please come back. Leo misses you. I looked at the sunlight streaming through the window and suddenly felt incredibly tired. David, I think I'd like to stay here for a few days. Stay for a few days? David sounded as if he'd heard something unbelievable. But what about the house? Who's going to cook? That question was like a knife, stabbing straight into my heart. I took a deep breath. You're all adults. You can figure it out for yourselves. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Mom, what are you trying to say? I'm saying, I said slowly, that I want to live my own life for a few days. David said something else, but I wasn't really listening. Carol was beside me, making frantic gestures and pointing at an imaginary watch on her wrist, signaling me to ignore him. Mom, just calm down. David's tone softened. I'll drive down this afternoon to get you. We can talk about this in person. There's no need, I said. I want to be alone for a while. Then I hung up. Carol gave me a thumbs up. Atta girl. I gave a bitter smile and continued with my breakfast. The oatmeal was a little cold now, but it was still delicious. After breakfast, Carol helped me clean the house. Although the old place had been empty for years, the foundation was still solid. Art called someone to get the power and water turned back on, and even fixed the heating. By noon, the living room and my bedroom were looking brand new. I'll go get you some groceries and things this afternoon, Carol said. You get some rest. After she left, I went upstairs to my old bedroom. The bed was still there. All it needed was a clean set of sheets. I opened the closet and found a few of my old clothes and some of David's father's. I took out one of his old shirts and buried my face in it, taking a deep breath. I could still smell the faint scent of his pipe tobacco. Tears welled up in my eyes again. After all these years, I thought I had forgotten his scent. I heard the sound of a car engine downstairs. I went to the window and saw a familiar black SUV parked outside. It was David's car. The doors opened, and David, Jessica, and Leo all got out. Jessica was holding a fruit basket, a strained smile plastered on her face. My heart began to beat faster, my fingers unconsciously clutching the old shirt. Should I go down? Should I forgive them? Should I go back to being their tireless, uncomplaining maid? The sun shone on David's head, and I was surprised to see he already had some gray hairs. When was the last time I had looked at him this closely? It must have been his birthday last year. I had made his favorite braised short ribs, but he didn't get home from work until after 9, and the food had gone cold. I put down the shirt and slowly walked downstairs. Before opening the door, I took a deep breath and checked my reflection in the peephole. The door opened, and David's face was a mask of relief. Mom, Jessica managed to smile. Mom, I was wrong yesterday. Please don't be angry. Leo rushed forward and hugged my waist. Grandma, I missed you. I stroked Leo's head and looked at my son and daughter-in-law. I suddenly knew exactly what I wanted. Come in, I said. We need to talk. Mom, this house is so old. It can't be comfortable to live here, David said, looking around with a frown so deep it could hold water. Jessica placed the fruit basket on the freshly wiped coffee table, her eyes darting toward the kitchen. Mom, you don't even have a refrigerator here. How are you going to eat? I didn't answer, just pulled Leo onto the sofa next to me. Leo, happy Thanksgiving, I said, pulling a crisp $50 bill I had prepared from my pocket. Thanks, Grandma. Leo happily took the money, but Jessica snatched it away from him. Mom, you shouldn't have, Jessica said with a fake smile. You're living here all alone. You'll need the money. I watched Leo's happy face fall, and a sharp pain went through my heart. That's for Leo, I said calmly. He's my grandson. What's wrong with me giving him a little holiday money? Jessica's smile froze on her face. Reluctantly, she handed the bill back to Leo. David cleared his throat. Mom, we're here to take you home. It's a holiday. A family should be together. Not so fast, I said. I want to stay in my old home for a while. For a while? Jessica's voice shot up. Then what about us at home? I looked up at her. The three of you are perfectly capable adults. Can't you cook for yourselves? Jessica's face changed instantly. Mom, what's that supposed to mean? We're so busy with work. I'm 68 years old, I interrupted her. I'm older than both of you, but I can still take care of myself. David knelt down and took my hand. Mom, was it something Jessica said yesterday that hurt you? She didn't mean it. I looked into my son's eyes and felt like I was looking at a stranger. Was this still the same little boy who wrote in his school essay that his mom was the greatest person in the world? David, I said softly, do you remember when you had that high fever when you were 10? David paused. Why are you bringing that up now? You had a fever of 104. The doctor said if we'd been any later, it could have been life-threatening, I continued. I was working overtime at the factory that day. A neighbor had to call the workshop to find me. I rode my bicycle to the hospital so fast that I fell 3 times on the way. David's gaze flickered. Mom. At the hospital, the nurse said you needed to be admitted for observation, but there were no beds left. My voice was calm, as if I were telling someone else's story. I got on my knees and begged the doctor. They finally set up a temporary bed for you in the hallway. I sat on a hard plastic chair and watched over you for 3 days and 3 nights until your fever broke. The living room was eerily quiet. Leo stared at me with wide eyes. Jessica fidgeted uncomfortably with her purse strap. David's eyes were red. Mom, I remember. No, you don't remember, I said, shaking my head. If you remembered, you wouldn't have let your wife speak to me that way. Jessica suddenly stood up. Mom, my attitude was bad yesterday, and I apologize. But you can't just leave like that. David was so worried about you. I looked at my daughter-in-law's perfectly shaped eyebrows and bright red lipstick and suddenly felt exhausted. Jessica, for the past 10 years, I've cooked for you, cleaned the house, and picked up Leo from school every single day. Have you ever once said thank you? Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. Mom, we're family, David interjected. We don't need to say thank you. Family, I nodded. So that means I deserve to be called a useless old woman. David's face changed. Did she really say that? He turned to glare at his wife. Jessica's face turned beet red. I was just angry. Enough, I said, standing up. You should go. I want to stay here for a while. I need some peace and quiet. Mom, David said, panicking. You can't do this. I can, I said calmly. I've made my decision. David wanted to say more, but Leo suddenly tugged on his pants. Daddy, Grandma's tired. The child's words silenced everyone. Finally, David relented. All right, Mom. You stay here for a few days. Call us if you need anything. He paused. We'll come see you again tomorrow. After they left, I let out a long sigh and collapsed onto the sofa. Carol was right. It was time for me to live for myself for a few years. That afternoon, Carol returned with bags and bags of supplies, towels, a toothbrush, slippers, and even a small electric rice cooker. Use this for now, she said. I'll take you to the farmer's market tomorrow, and we can get you some more things. The next morning, Carol came knocking on my door, full of excitement. Get up, get up. I'm taking you to meet Mr. Peterson. She dragged me to the town's senior community center. It was a 3-story building that used to be the town's elementary school. After the school moved, it was converted into a center for seniors. Mr. Peterson was a slim man in his early 60s with reading glasses, who spoke slowly but methodically. Mrs. Miller, welcome, welcome, he said, warmly shaking my hand. Carol has told me so much about you. I felt a little embarrassed. I don't really know how to do anything. Oh, that's what we're here for, to learn. Mr. Peterson said with a smile. We have pottery classes, painting, line dancing, and even a workshop on how to use a smartphone. Helen is a fantastic cook, Carol chimed in. Mr. Mater says. Peterson's eyes lit up. That's wonderful. We're having a community bake-off next month. You must participate. I waved my hands in refusal. Oh no, my cooking is nothing special. Mom? David's voice suddenly came from the doorway. I turned to see him standing there alone, holding several large bags. What are you doing here? I asked. Just bringing you some things, David said, walking in and nodding at Mr. Peterson. Mom, can I talk to you alone for a minute? Mr. Peterson tactfully made an excuse and left. David finally spoke. Jessica was too embarrassed to come. And Leo is in school. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. Mom, I didn't sleep at all last night. David's eyes were indeed a bit dark. I've been thinking a lot. And I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything. After you left, I realized just how much you do for us, David said, looking down. The groceries in the fridge, you bought all of them. Leo's homework, you checked it every night. Even my shirts, you ironed them. I sighed. David, that's not what I want to hear. Then what do you want? David looked up, his eyes filled with confusion. Tell me, and I'll do it. I looked at my son's bewildered face and suddenly understood. He had no idea what I wanted. For 30 years, I had taken such good care of him that he never realized his mother was a person with her own thoughts and needs, outside of just being mom. David, I said softly, I don't want anything. I just want to be Helen Miller for a few days, not just David's mom. David was stunned, clearly not understanding what I meant. You should go home for now, I said. I'm fine here, really. David hesitated, but finally nodded. All right, take care of yourself, Mom. Call me if you need anything. Watching him leave, my heart felt a mix of sorrow and relief. Carol reappeared out of nowhere. Come on, I'll introduce you to your classmates. She led me into a classroom where a dozen or so seniors were practicing pottery. A woman with curly hair and a brightly colored sweater greeted us warmly. You must be the Helen that Carol's been telling us about. Come, sit. This is Brenda, Carol introduced, the life of the party at our senior center. Brenda giggled. Oh, stop it, you. She pulled me down into a seat. Helen, I hear you're an amazing cook. I smiled bashfully. Just simple home cooking. Nothing simple about it, Brenda said mysteriously. Carol says you can make tofu taste better than steak. Everyone laughed. Mr. Peterson came over and handed me a lump of clay. Mrs. Miller, give it a try. I took the clay, my hands trembling slightly. The last time I had done anything like this was when David was in elementary school, helping him with an art project. Don't be nervous, Brenda leaned in. It doesn't matter if you mess up. Nobody cares here. I started to work the clay, and soon I had formed a small, lopsided bowl. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Not a mother's bowl, not David's mom's bowl, just Helen's. Brenda clapped her hands. That's wonderful. It has character. Everyone gathered around to praise my little bowl. My face grew warm, but a long-forgotten warmth spread through my heart. When the class was over, Brenda dragged Carol and me to the cafeteria for lunch. We have a ballroom dancing class next week, she said excitedly. You two have to come. I can't dance. I quickly waved my hands. I'll teach you. Brenda winked. I was a dancer in a traveling show in my youth. When I got back to the house, it was already dark. I was surprised to find someone standing at my door. It was David, with 2 large bags next to him. Mom, he said, looking a little awkward. I brought you some food. I opened the door and let him in. David took the items out of the bags one by one and put them in the refrigerator: milk, eggs, vegetables, fruit. I could have bought these myself, I said. I know, David said, his head down. I just wanted to come see you. My heart softened. Have you eaten? No. I tied on an apron. Let me whip something up. I took 2 eggs and some spinach from the fridge. It won't be much. David sat on a small stool in the kitchen, watching me cook, just like he did when he was a little boy. The oil sizzled in the pan as I cracked the eggs in. Mom, David said suddenly, I signed up for a cooking class at work. My hand paused. I want to learn how to cook for myself, David continued. I can't always depend on you. I didn't say anything, just scooped the scrambled eggs onto a plate. Jessica, she's really sorry, David said cautiously. She just has a quick temper. David, I interrupted him. I don't want to talk about this. David obediently shut his mouth and ate his food. As he was leaving, he hesitated. Mom, do you still love us? The question hit me like a hammer. I stepped forward and hugged my son, my child, the boy I had raised with my own 2 hands. Silly boy, I whispered. A mother's love is forever. David's shoulders relaxed. Then, I'll bring Leo to see you this weekend. I nodded. Okay. After David left, I sat on the sofa, replaying the day's events in my head, the pottery class, Brenda, the ballroom dancing, and David's question. I took out my phone and sent a message to Carol. Sign me up for that ballroom dancing class next week. No, your wrist needs to be like this. Brenda grabbed my wrist and gently twisted it. Yes, that's it. Now, follow the rhythm. In the senior center's activity room, a dozen couples were ballroom dancing. I was being spun around and around by Brenda, feeling dizzy but strangely exhilarated. I can't. I need a break, I said, panting as I stopped. Just a little rest, Brenda said, still full of energy. Helen, you're out of shape. You need to exercise more. I collapsed into a chair and took a sip of water, watching the other seniors dance gracefully. A month ago, I never would have imagined myself here, learning to dance. Carol was having a great time, dancing with Mr. Peterson. They moved together perfectly, like they had been partners for years. Did you sign up for the community bake-off? Brenda asked, leaning in. I shook my head. My skills aren't good enough for a competition. Oh, don't be so modest, Brenda said, giving me a playful shove. Carol said your pot roast could make a man weep. Her exaggeration made me laugh. It's not that good. That settles it, Brenda said decisively. I'm signing you up. Before I could protest, she had already dashed off to find Mr. Peterson. I shook my head with a helpless smile, but a small part of me felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe it was time to let others taste my cooking. When I got home after class, I found David and Leo waiting at my door. Leo was holding a drawing. Grandma, look what I drew. It's you. In the drawing, I was wearing an apron and cooking at the stove. The lines were crooked, but I could tell he had put his heart into it. My eyes grew warm. It's beautiful, David said sheepishly. Leo insisted on coming today. I hope we're not bothering you. Of course not, I said, stroking Leo's head. Come on in. Grandma will make you something delicious. David offered to help in the kitchen. I watched him clumsily trying to slice potatoes. Some pieces were as thick as his fingers, others as thin as a needle. I couldn't help but laugh. Here, let me do it. No, David insisted. Let me try. Leo sat on a small stool by the kitchen door, eating an apple and watching us. The sunlight streamed through the window. The oil sizzled in the pan, and for a moment, I felt like I had gone back in time to when David was a little boy, just the 2 of us against the world. Mom, David said suddenly, Jessica is working late today. She wanted me to say hello for her. My hands paused. Okay, she actually misses you a lot, David said cautiously. The house is a mess without you. I didn't respond. Over the past month, David had been bringing Leo to see me 2 or 3 times a week, but Jessica had not come once. I didn't blame her. My words that day had been harsh. Grandma, when are you coming home? Leo asked, looking up at me. My heart ached. Does Leo miss Grandma? Uh-huh, Leo nodded. Daddy's cooking is bad, and Mommy always orders pizza. David coughed awkwardly. I knelt to be at eye level with Leo. Grandma is very happy here, but Leo can come visit Grandma anytime he wants, okay? Leo nodded, though he didn't fully understand. During dinner, David said hesitantly, Mom, that bake-off. Can I come and watch? I looked up in surprise. How did you know about that? Brenda told me, David smiled. She added me on Facebook. She said I had to come see your skills for myself. That Brenda, I thought, half amused, half exasperated. It's just a little competition, nothing special to see. I want to see. Leo raised his hand. I want to cheer for Grandma. Looking at my grandson's sparkling eyes, I had to agree. All right. The competition was set for the following Saturday in the town square. As the day approached, I grew more and more nervous. I had been cooking my whole life, but never in front of a crowd. Brenda and Carol were more excited than I was, constantly giving me suggestions. Make your signature dish, Brenda said. Make that pot roast. Carol agreed. You're guaranteed to win first place. The night before the competition, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. At 3 in the morning, I finally got up and checked all my ingredients one more time. Just as the sky was beginning to lighten, I received a text message from David. Mom, good luck. Leo and I are so proud of you. Tears instantly filled my eyes. On the day of the competition, a dozen cooking stations were set up in the square. Most of the contestants were chefs from local restaurants. I was the only amateur. Brenda and Carol came early to help me set up and even made an exaggerated banner that read, Helen Miller for the win. This is so embarrassing, I said, trying to take the banner down, but Brenda wouldn't let me. What's there to be embarrassed about? She said, her hands on her hips. The honor of the senior center rests on your shoulders. Just before the competition started, David arrived with Leo. To my surprise, Jessica came too, though she stood at a distance and didn't come closer. I nodded at her, and she gave me a weak smile in return. The announcer explained the rules. Each contestant had 1 hour to make their signature dish, which would be judged by a panel of 5 judges. When the whistle blew, I immediately got to work. I was making my famous pot roast, but with a secret twist, I used a dark beer instead of water and added a few dried plums to make the meat extra tender. The noise of the crowd faded away, and my world shrank to the pot and ingredients in front of me. Time's up. The announcer's voice brought me back to reality. I plated the pot roast, garnishing it with fresh parsley. The meat was a beautiful, rich brown, glistening and fragrant. Brenda took an exaggerated sniff. Oh my God, that smells heavenly. The judges tasted each dish one by one. When they got to my pot roast, their serious expressions turned to surprise. This meat is so tender it melts in your mouth. Rich but not greasy, and there's a unique flavor. What's your secret? I smiled shyly. Just an old family recipe. During the scoring, my heart was in my throat. The announcer declared, and the first prize goes to Mrs. Helen Miller for her pot roast. The crowd erupted in applause. Brenda and Carol rushed up to hug me, laughing and crying at the same time. Leo ran over too. Grandma is the best. David stood to the side, his eyes shining with tears. I glanced over at Jessica and saw her looking down at her phone, her expression unreadable. When I went up to accept my award, one of the judges asked me, Mrs. Miller, with your talent, have you ever considered opening a small restaurant? Oh, I was stunned. I'm just a housewife. What a shame, the judge shook his head. It would be a crime not to share this food with the world. After the event, a man in a suit stopped me. Mrs. Miller, hello. I'm the manager of a local restaurant group. I was wondering if you might be interested in partnering with us to open a small bistro? I was completely bewildered. I've never thought about it. No rush, he said, handing me his business card. Please, think it over. On the way home, David was very quiet. Just as we were nearing the house, he suddenly said, Mom, that restaurant thing? What are you thinking? I shook my head. He was just being polite. I'm too old to be opening a restaurant. But David looked like he wanted to say more. Jessica suddenly spoke up. Mom, if you opened a restaurant, it would definitely be a huge hit. It was the first time she had spoken to me directly all day. I looked at her in surprise. Jessica managed to smile. Your cooking is really amazing. Back at the house, Jessica even helped me put things away. While David and Leo were in the bathroom, she whispered, Mom, I'm sorry. I was stunned. I was so thoughtless before, Jessica said, her eyes red. You did so much for us, and I patted her hand. It's all in the past. That evening, after David's family left, I sat on the sofa in a daze. My phone buzzed. It was a video link from Brenda. Someone had uploaded a video of the competition to the internet. The title was, "This 6-8-year-old grandma's cooking will blow your mind." I clicked on the comments section. "This grandma is incredible. I want to eat her pot roast. This is what real home cooking tastes like." I smiled and shook my head. Just as I was about to turn off my phone, another message came in. It was from the restaurant manager, with a proposed menu and a partnership plan attached. He added, "Mrs. Miller, we are very serious." I put the phone aside and walked to the window. The night in Maple Creek was quiet and peaceful, with the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. For the first time in my 68 years, I felt that life was full of so many possibilities. "You're really going?" David's voice was an octave higher on the phone. I held the phone with my shoulder while stuffing a bottle of sunscreen into my suitcase. "The tickets are already bought." "But Florida is so far away. And for a whole week?" David sounded worried. "You'll be all alone. It's not safe." "I'm not going alone," I explained patiently. "It's a group trip organized by the senior center. There are more than 20 of us. Brenda and Carol are both going." There was a pause on the other end. "Mom, is this because of what Jessica said the other day?" I stopped packing and sighed. Last Sunday, when David's family came over for dinner, Jessica had become unusually enthusiastic when she heard I was considering the bistro offer. "Mom, if you open a restaurant, we'll support you 100%. David can help you with the books, and I'll handle the marketing." I had just smiled and didn't comment at the time. But as they were leaving, David quietly told me that one of Jessica's friends said that nostalgic, home-style bistros were very popular right now and could make a lot of money. "David," I said, tucking the sunscreen into my toiletries bag, "I'm going on this trip because I want to go. I'm 68 years old, and I've never seen the ocean. But my flight is about to board. I have to go," I said, even though my flight wasn't until the next morning. I hung up. The phone screen was still lit up with a message from Brenda. "Don't forget your swimsuit." A swimsuit? I shook my head. At my age? But there it was, lying in my suitcase, a new one-piece swimsuit, navy blue with a little skirt, the kind Brenda had insisted I buy at the new clothing store in town. "Helen, you have fair skin. Blue will look great on you," she had said, holding it up against me, ignoring my protests. I put the phone aside and continued checking my luggage. Sunscreen, sun hat, clothes, daily medications, and a brand new notebook. It was a gift from Mr. Peterson, who told me to write down my travel experiences. Outside, the early summer sun shone down on the small yard of my old house. A month ago, I was still debating whether to accept the restaurant owner's offer, and now I was going to Florida. Sometimes, life takes turns that are completely unexpected. The doorbell rang. It was Brenda, wearing an outrageously wide-brimmed straw hat, looking like she was ready to hit the beach that very second. "Are you all packed?" She breezed in, inspecting my suitcase. "Got the swimsuit? Got the sunscreen?" "Yes and yes," I laughed, pointing them out to her. Brenda nodded in satisfaction, then lowered her voice. "I heard your daughter-in-law wasn't too happy about you going on this trip." I shrugged. "She thinks it's too far." Brenda rolled her eyes. "She doesn't think it's too far when she goes on business trips overseas, does she?" Her comment made me laugh. Brenda patted my shoulder. "Helen, at our age, we should do whatever we want to do. See you at the airport tomorrow." After Brenda left, I sent a text to David. "Leaving for my trip tomorrow. My phone will be off for a few days, don't worry." He replied almost instantly. "Mom, be safe. Please send me a message every day to let me know you're okay." I didn't reply, just sighed softly. Since the bake-off, David's attitude toward me had subtly changed. He was no longer taking me for granted. There was a new carefulness in his voice, which was both gratifying and a little sad. The next morning, Art drove Carol and me to the airport. Brenda was already waiting for us in the departure lounge, surrounded by a group of our classmates from the senior center, all chattering like excited schoolchildren. "Helen," she waved at me from a distance. "Over here. I saved you a window seat." As the plane took off, I gripped the armrests, my heart pounding. It was my first time flying. When the plane banked and climbed into the sky, everything on the ground quickly shrank, and I felt a strange sense of liberation, as if all my troubles and worries had been left behind on the ground. Beautiful, isn't it? Brenda leaned over, pointing at the sea of clouds outside the window. I nodded, speechless. The sun shone through the small window, warm and bright on my face. 3 hours later, we landed in Sarasota. A wave of heat hit us, carrying the salty smell of the sea. We checked into a hotel not far from the beach. I was rooming with Brenda. Quick, change into your swimsuit, Brenda said, already shedding her clothes as soon as we got into the room. Let's go dip our toes in the water before the sun sets. I hesitated for a moment, then took out the blue swimsuit. After putting it on, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long time, my sagging arms, my wrinkled neck, and all the marks left by childbirth and a life of hard work. I sighed and put on a cover-up. Oh, what are you covering up for? Brenda pulled off my cover-up. You look great. She dragged me to the beach. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow on the water. There weren't many people on the sand. A few kids were building sandcastles, and in the distance, some young people were playing beach volleyball. I walked barefoot on the soft sand, the warmth spreading from my feet throughout my body. The waves gently lapped at my ankles. Come on, let's go a little deeper, Brenda said, pulling me into the water. The water slowly rose past my knees, and the bottom of my swimsuit got wet, clinging to my skin. A slightly larger wave came, and I stumbled. Brenda quickly steadied me. See? She asked. I didn't answer because I realized I was laughing so hard I couldn't stop. How long had it been since I had done something like this? Playing in the water like a child, without a care in the world. You crazy old lady. Brenda laughed too, splashing water at me. We played until the sun had completely set. Back on the beach, we sat side by side, panting and watching the sunset. Helen, Brenda said suddenly, do you know why I love dragging you around to do things? I shook my head. Because I see my younger self in you, she said, looking out at the horizon. Always so cautious, afraid to try anything new. Until my husband passed away, I turned to look at her. In the twilight, Brenda's profile looked exceptionally soft. The day he died, I realized that the trip to Europe we had planned our whole lives would never happen, she said softly. So now, I do whatever I want. I don't want to have any more regrets. I took her hand. 2 wrinkled hands, holding each other tightly in the sea breeze. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We went snorkeling to see the coral reefs, rode jet skis, and even tried surfing, though that ended with me getting completely wiped out. Brenda also dragged me to get a hot stone massage on the beach. As the warm stones were placed on my back, I was so comfortable I almost fell asleep. On the 5th morning, I met a foreign lady in the hotel restaurant. She was holding a tray and looking for a seat. I gathered my courage and, in my broken English, invited her to my table. Her eyes lit up. Thank you, and that's how I met Emma, a retired teacher from Australia who was traveling through the country alone. My English was limited, and her knowledge of our language was even worse. But we managed to have a great conversation with the help of hand gestures and a translation app on my phone. You? A chef? Emma asked, pointing to the picture of me from the bake-off on my phone. I nodded, and an idea came to me. I typed into my phone, would you like to learn how to cook some simple American dishes? Emma nodded enthusiastically, so we made a plan. After I returned to Maple Creek, I would teach her a few classic home-cooked meals. When we parted, Emma gave me a tight hug. You are amazing. When I was packing in my room, Brenda wiggled her eyebrows at me. Ooh, making foreign friends now, are we? I laughed and tossed a seashell at her. She's interested in our food, so I offered to teach her a few things. Well, Brenda shook her head dramatically. Our Helen is going international. On our last night, we attended the hotel's beach barbecue. The sea breeze was gentle, the stars were bright, and everyone sat around a bonfire, singing and dancing. Mr. Peterson, after 2 beers, got up and did a hilarious line dance that made everyone roar with laughter. I slipped away from the party and walked to the water's edge. The tide ebbed and flowed, and the moonlight created a silver path on the water. I took out my phone and took a picture of the beautiful scene. then sent it to David. Almost immediately, the phone rang. "Mom," David's voice was a mix of surprise and joy. "You finally called. Are you having fun?" "I'm having a great time," I said softly. "Leo misses you," David said. We all miss you." Over the sound of the waves, I suddenly missed the feeling of my grandson's soft little arms wrapped around my neck. "I'll be back the day after tomorrow," I said. After hanging up, I stared out at the ocean for a long time. This trip felt like a dream, but I knew that something inside me had changed, in that place that had been washed clean by the waves. "Helen, it's a real shame your talent is wasted by not opening a restaurant," Emma exclaimed in her accented English, devouring the chicken pot pie I had made while giving me a thumbs up. I smiled and refilled her glass of iced tea. "Slow down, you'll choke." It had been 2 weeks since my trip to Florida, and Emma had kept her promise to visit Maple Creek to learn some cooking. It was less like teaching and more like having a permanent dinner guest. The Australian woman's love for American home cooking was beyond anything I could have imagined. "Teacher Helen," she said, seriously taking out a notebook, "please tell me the name of this spice." She pointed at the bay leaf on the cutting board. I patiently taught her how to identify different herbs and demonstrated basic knife skills. Emma was a diligent student, even if her sliced carrots were all different shapes and sizes, looking more like a pile of small sticks. "It's magic," she said, her eyes wide as she watched me transform simple ingredients into a delicious meal. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself enjoying teaching more and more. Just as I was showing her how to properly brown the chicken, the doorbell rang. It was David, Jessica, and Leo. The moment he saw me, Leo ran into my arms. "Grandma, I missed you so much." I hugged my grandson and kissed his cheek, then looked up to see David and Jessica standing at the door, their hands full of shopping bags. "Mom," David smiled, "we came to visit." Jessica's face was also wreathed in smiles. "Mom, I heard you have a friend visiting from overseas. We brought some fruit." I stepped aside to let them in. Emma greeted them warmly. "Hello, I am Emma." David stumbled through a greeting in English, while Jessica just kept complimenting Emma on her language skills. After the initial pleasantries, Jessica's eyes kept wandering to the kitchen. "Mom, are you teaching your friend how to cook?" "Yes," I nodded. "Emma is very interested in our food. So, have you thought any more about the bistro?" Jessica leaned in, lowering her voice. "That restaurant owner contacted David again. He said he's willing to invest." I frowned. "I never agreed to anything." "Mom," David interjected, "this is a great opportunity. Your talent is too good to waste." Emma curiously asked what we were talking about. After I briefly explained, she clapped her hands excitedly. "Open a restaurant. Wonderful idea. I can be the first customer." Leo also started jumping up and down. "Grandma is opening a restaurant. I'm going to eat there every day." Looking at the hopeful faces all around me, I started to reconsider. Maybe I could really do it. That night, after everyone had left, I sat in my yard, lost in thought. The moonlight bathed the old brick patio in a silvery glow. I thought about the ocean in Florida, about the look of delight on Emma's face when she tasted my food, and about the pride in Leo's voice when he talked about his grandma opening a restaurant. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Brenda. "I heard you're opening a restaurant. That's fantastic. I'll be your first waitress." I smiled and shook my head, replying, "Haven't decided yet." The next morning, Mr. Peterson himself came to visit. "Helen," he said, rubbing his hands together, "I heard you're considering opening a bistro." I poured him a cup of tea. News travels fast. The senior center could invest. Mr. Peterson said excitedly, "With your skills, it would be a huge success." I laughed, amused. "You've got to be kidding me." "I'm serious," Mr. Peterson said, putting down his teacup. "The senior center has been looking for a way to generate some income to fund more activities for our members. If you're willing, we could help you convert the ground floor of your house into a dining room. You provide the culinary expertise, and we split the profits." I was stunned. I had never expected such a concrete proposal. "Think about it," Mr. Peterson said, getting up to leave, no rush. After he left, I walked around my house. The two-story building's ground floor was already a living room and kitchen. It could indeed be converted into a dining space. I could even put a few tables in the yard. Dining under the grape arbor in the summer would be lovely. As I was thinking, the doorbell rang again. It was a stranger, a woman in her early 30s with a weary face, holding the hand of a 4 or 5-year-old girl. "Hello," she asked timidly. "Are you hiring?" I was confused. "No, but..." She showed me her phone. On the screen was a forwarded message. "Maple Creek Old House Bistro now hiring kitchen help. Good pay." I immediately knew who was responsible. Brenda. She must have been spreading the news that I was opening a restaurant. "Come in and sit down," I sighed, letting them in. "What's your name?" "My name is Sarah," the woman said softly. "And this is my daughter Lily. We just moved back here from out of state. It's been hard to find a job." As she spoke, the little girl clutched her mother's dress, looking at me with big, shy eyes. My heart softened. "Have you eaten?" Sarah shook her head. I went to the kitchen and quickly brought out 2 steaming bowls of chicken noodle soup. Watching the mother and daughter eat so hungrily, I made a decision. "Sarah, if you don't mind, you can start by helping me out here. The restaurant isn't open yet, but..." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you so much." And just like that, Helen's kitchen was unofficially born. The very next day, Mr. Peterson arrived with a construction crew to start renovating the house. Brenda appointed herself as the marketing director and started handing out flyers all over town. Emma extended her visa, claiming she needed to stay on as an international consultant. Even Carol came over to help with peeling vegetables. What surprised me the most was the attitude of David and Jessica. When they heard I was really opening the restaurant, they started coming over to help almost every weekend. Jessica even offered to help me design the menu and set the prices. I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was interested in the profits, but I no longer cared. Every morning, as the sun streamed into my kitchen, I would look at the fresh ingredients on my cutting board, smell the fragrant aromas from my pots and pans, and listen to the rhythmic sound of Sarah's chopping and Lily's laughter, and I would feel that my life was full of hope. On our first day of business, we only served 5 tables, all classmates from the senior center, but their reviews were glowing. The next day, we had 10 tables. The day after, 20. A week later, we had to start taking reservations. "Helen!" Brenda burst into the kitchen. "The local TV station wants to interview you." I was busy cooking and didn't even look up. "Stop joking." "I'm serious," she said, waving her phone. "That video from the bake-off went viral. It has hundreds of thousands of views." I finally looked up. My spatula paused in mid-air. "What?" Sure enough, that afternoon, a reporter and a cameraman from the local news station showed up. I was so nervous my hands were shaking, and I almost burned the sweet and sour ribs. "Helen," the young female reporter asked, "what does it feel like to start a new business at your age?" I looked at the camera and suddenly thought of the ocean in Florida, of that moment of clarity I had while standing on the beach. "Age is just a number," I heard myself say. "If you want to do something, it's never too late to start." After the interview aired, my little bistro became a local sensation. We were booked solid for the next 3 months, and people were even driving in from the state capital to eat here. Mr. Peterson was overjoyed, as the senior center's bank account was growing every day. However, as the business boomed, David and Jessica started visiting more frequently. Jessica would casually bring up expanding the business, opening a second location. David would always find an excuse to look at the account books. One rainy afternoon, when the restaurant was quiet, I was in the kitchen experimenting with a new recipe when I heard arguing from the front yard. Mom would never agree to that. It was David's voice. "Are you stupid?" Jessica's voice was sharp. "Do you know how much this old house is worth? If we could get it rezoned for commercial use?" I froze, the cookbook in my hands falling to the floor. "Keep your voice down," David hissed. "This has to be done slowly." "Slowly? What's there to be slow about?" Jessica sneered. "By the time the old woman writes her will and donates everything to that stupid senior center, you'll be left with nothing." I leaned against the stove, my legs feeling weak. So that was it. That was why they had suddenly become so attentive. Mom wouldn't do that, David said, though he didn't sound confident. I'm her son. Son? Jessica's voice was full of scorn. Look at you now, hovering around that old woman like a puppy dog. You're just after her money, same as me. After a moment of silence, David said quietly, just stop it. She'll leave it all to us eventually. I'm her only child. I couldn't listen anymore. I pushed open the door and walked out. When David and Jessica saw me, their faces went pale. Mom, when did you? David stammered. I looked at him, my son, the child I had raised with my own 2 hands, and he suddenly felt like a stranger. I heard everything, I said calmly. Jessica's face went from red to white, and then she seemed to give up all pretense. Mom, we're just thinking of you. You're getting old, you should be relaxing. If you let David manage the restaurant and the house, wouldn't your life be easier? I shook my head and walked into my study. From the back of a drawer, I took out an envelope. Inside was the will I had quietly drawn up last month. 70% of the proceeds from the house and the bistro would be donated to the senior center, and the remaining 30% would go into an education fund for Leo. I walked back into the living room with the envelope. David and Jessica were still standing there. David, I said, taking a deep breath, this is my will. I was planning on giving it to you in a few years. David took the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. When he saw the contents, his face turned ashen. Mom, you can't. You old fool. Jessica snatched the will from him, and after a quick glance, she shrieked, Are you crazy? Giving the family's money to strangers. This is my decision, I said calmly. Jessica lunged at me, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me. You won't get away with this. We'll get a lawyer to overturn it. You're senile. That's enough. David pulled Jessica away. Are you out of your mind? Jessica shoved him off, pointing a finger at my face. You useless old woman. You just wait. She slammed the door on her way out. David stood there, clutching the will, tears suddenly streaming down his face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked back to the kitchen. The soup on the stove was still simmering. I mechanically picked up a ladle and stirred, my tears falling one by one into the pot. Helen, you need a good lawyer. Brenda placed a folder in front of me. My cousin recommended this guy. He specializes in inheritance disputes. I rubbed my temples. I had barely slept since the argument last week. David called me every day, sometimes to apologize, sometimes to explain, and sometimes just to listen to my breathing in silence. Thank you, I said, opening the folder. But what I'm more worried about right now is them claiming I'm mentally incompetent, Brenda said, getting straight to the point. I nodded. Jessica's threat was not an empty one. If we went to court, and they could prove I was legally incompetent, my will would be overturned. Don't worry, Brenda patted my hand. Mister, Peterson has already contacted the head of neurology at the city hospital. You have a full evaluation tomorrow. We'll get a medical certificate first. I squeezed her hand gratefully. Since the incident, my friends from the senior center had been my rock. Carol came over every day to cook for me, Mister. Peterson was running around contacting lawyers, and Brenda had barely left my side, afraid I would do something drastic. The doorbell rang. Brenda went to get it, and I heard her surprised voice. Leo? What? I quickly got up and saw my grandson standing at the door, his backpack on, his eyes red. Grandma? The moment he saw me, he ran into my arms, burying his face in my stomach. Mommy and Daddy were fighting. I was so scared. I held him tight, my heart aching. It's okay, sweetie. It's okay now. Grandma's here. Leo looked up, his eyes watery. Grandma, are you really going to give the house to other people? I wiped his tears. Not to other people, honey. To the senior center, so more grandpas and grandmas can have a happy place to go. But can I still come here? Of course you can. I kissed his forehead. This is Grandma's house, and it will always be your house too. Leo seemed relieved and leaned against me, playing with his toys. I quietly sent a text to David. Leo is with me. Half an hour later, David rushed over. He looked exhausted, with stubble on his chin and a wrinkled shirt. Mom, he said, standing at the door, unable to find the right words. I had Brenda take Leo out to the yard to play, then gestured for David to sit down. Mom, Jessica, she. David wrung his hands. She went back to her mother's house. She said, she wants a divorce. I poured him a cup of tea. And what do you think? David suddenly broke down. I don't know, he said, grabbing his hair. Mom, I really don't know how things got so out of hand. I just wanted my house and my money. I finished his sentence softly. David looked up sharply. No, He choked up, tears streaming down his face. At first, Jessica just said you were working too hard at the restaurant and we should help. Then she said the house was valuable, and I got greedy. I looked at him, my son, the little boy who once wrote in a school paper that he wanted to buy his mom a big house when he grew up. David, I said, taking out an old photo album. Do you remember this? The album was full of old pictures of us. His first day of school, with me kneeling to tie his shoes. The year he took his SATs, with me waiting outside the testing center with a thermos. His college graduation, with me standing on my tiptoes in the crowd to get a picture. David flipped through the album, his hands trembling. Mom, I never wanted to be a burden to you, I said softly. But I'm a person too. I have my own thoughts, and I have the right to decide what to do with my own things. David closed the album and suddenly knelt on the floor. Mom, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I helped him up, and we held each other and cried. The next day, Mr. Peterson took me to the hospital for a full evaluation. The results showed that my cognitive functions were completely normal, even better than most people my age. Mrs. Miller, the doctor said with a smile, you've got a sharp mind. You could live another 30 years with no problem. With the medical certificate in hand, I went to see the lawyer Brenda had recommended. Mr. Davis was in his early 50s, sharp and competent. After listening to my story, he said confidently, Mrs. Miller, this case is a sure win. But what? Once this goes to court, he said, hesitating, your relationship with your son. I knew what he meant. The law could protect my assets, but it couldn't mend a broken family. When I got home, I found an unfamiliar car parked outside. A man in a suit was standing in my yard. When he saw me, he immediately came forward. Mrs. Miller, hello. I'm Director Zhang from the state's Cultural Tourism Bureau. I looked at him, confused. Can I help you? Yes, he said enthusiastically. We saw your interview on TV, and we're very impressed with your culinary skills. We have a US-Japan-Korea cultural exchange event next month, and we would like you to participate as a representative of American home cooking. I was stunned. Me? A representative? Yes, Director Zhang nodded. It's a 2-week event, all expenses paid. Please, consider it. After he left, I sat in my yard in a daze. A cultural exchange. Going overseas. Right in the middle of this family crisis. My phone rang. It was a video call from Emma. She was back in Australia now, but had been keeping in touch with me every week. Helen, she shouted excitedly. Guess what? A restaurant here wants to invite you to Australia for a food festival. This is your chance, David said seriously. As for things at home, I'll handle it. I'm going to have a serious talk with Jessica. He gave a bitter smile. To be honest, we've had problems for a long time, not just because of all this. I took my son's hand. David, I love you. I always will. But I love myself too. And I want to live the life that I want to live. David nodded, his eyes red again. I know, Mom. I'm so sorry. 3 days later, I made my decision. I accepted the invitation for the cultural exchange and temporarily left the bistro in the care of Brenda and Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson. Davis helped me finalize all the legal documents to make sure everything was in order. As for David and Jessica, I told David that I would respect his decision, whatever it may be. And if he needed me, I was willing to sit down and talk with Jessica any time. The night before I left, Leo refused to sleep in his own bed. Grandma, how long will you be gone? Just 2 weeks, I said, stroking his head. And I'll bring you back a present. I want a robot from Japan. Leo immediately perked up. David stood at the door, hesitating. I motioned for him to come in. We sat side by side on the bed, watching Leo drift off to sleep. "Mom," David said softly, "I contacted Jessica. She agreed to come back next week to talk about our marriage." I patted his hand. "Whatever you decide, I will support you." David leaned his head on my shoulder like a child. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft, gentle glow on the three of us. The mediation room was cold, but I still felt hot and stuffy. Across the table, Jessica sat with perfect makeup, her lips pressed into a thin line, while her lawyer shuffled through papers. David sat next to me, constantly wiping sweat from his forehead. According to my client's statement, Jessica's lawyer said, pushing up his glasses, "Mrs. Miller has been exhibiting erratic behavior in recent years, with large sums of money unaccounted for. She has also suddenly changed her will to donate the majority of her assets to a non-family institution." "That is a complete fabrication," my lawyer, Mr. Davis, immediately countered. "Mrs. Miller's mental state is perfectly sound, as proven by this medical report from the hospital. The so-called large sums are the normal income and expenses of her bistro, all of which are well documented." Jessica sneered. "Then why did she suddenly decide to give her assets to strangers? If that's not senility, what is?" "Jessica," David hissed, "you promised me you would be reasonable." "Reasonable? What's there to be reasonable about?" Jessica shot up from her chair. "Your mother would rather give her money to strangers than to her own grandson, and you're still defending her?" The mediator tapped the table. "Please, let's all remain calm." I took a deep breath and took out a folder from my bag. "These are my journals from the past 30 years, documenting every milestone of David's life." I then took out my phone, and these are the recordings of all my phone conversations with my son and daughter-in-law for the past 2 years. David looked at me in shock. "Mom, you—" I started recording our conversations after the first time Jessica called me a useless old woman. I said calmly, "I think a judge would be very interested in listening to these." Jessica's face went pale. Her lawyer started flipping through the documents with increasing urgency, his expression growing more and more grim. "Furthermore," I continued, "regarding the flow of funds David mentioned, I also made some discoveries." I turned to my son. "David, do you remember opening a bank account in my name last year?" David's eyes darted around. That was to make it easier to transfer money to you. Is that so?" I produced a bank statement. "Then why did this account transfer out $15,000 over the past 6 months to a construction company? A company whose legal representative," I looked at Jessica, "is your cousin." The room fell silent. The color drained from David's face, and Jessica's nails dug deep into her palms. "Mom," David's voice trembled. I didn't know." "You knew," I said softly. "You just chose to look the other way." The mediator cleared his throat. "Given the complexity of the situation, I suggest." "There's no need." Jessica suddenly stood up. "We're dropping the lawsuit." She grabbed her bag and stormed out. At the door, she turned and gave David a venomous look. "You can have your mother." The door slammed shut, leaving the room in dead silence. David collapsed into his chair, his hands covering his face. The mediator and Mr. Davis tactfully left, leaving just the two of us. "Mom." David's voice came from behind his hands. "I'm sorry. I really didn't know about the money." "David." I pulled his hands away from his face, forcing him to look at me. "I don't blame you for wanting money. I blame you for being too cowardly to ask me for it, choosing instead to sneak around behind my back." Large tears rolled down David's cheeks. "I was afraid you wouldn't give it to me. If you had just talked to me, told me you needed money for a business venture or for Leo's tutoring, would I have said no?" I wiped his tears. "But you and Jessica, you played good cop, bad cop, and treated me like a fool." David suddenly fell to his knees, hugging my legs and sobbing, "Mom, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong now." I stroked his hair, just as I did when he had nightmares as a child. "David, I may be old, but I'm not senile. I know money is important, but it can't buy family, and it can't buy respect." David looked up, his eyes full of tears. "Mom, Jessica, she. That's for you to decide." I said softly. I just want you to be happy. After leaving the mediation, Mr. Davis told me that Jessica's side had officially withdrawn all legal action. Do you want to pursue the matter of the missing money? He asked. I shook my head. No, let it go. Consider it child support for Leo. On the way home, David was silent. Just as we were pulling up to the house, he suddenly said, Mom, I think I need to move out for a while. I need to do some thinking. I nodded. The old house is always open to you. 3 days later, I boarded a flight to Japan. Brenda, Carol, Mr. Peterson, and a whole group from the senior center came to see me off, making a cheerful, bustling crowd. David came too, with Leo. Leo kept reminding me, Don't forget my toy robot. Grandma, you have to take lots of pictures. I will, I promised, kissing his cheek. David helped me with my luggage, looking like he wanted to say something. Just before I boarded, he suddenly hugged me. Mom, have a safe trip. I'll take care of everything here. I'll be waiting for you when you get back. I patted his back and said nothing. Some paths he had to walk himself. Some lessons he had to learn on his own. As the plane climbed into the sky, I looked out the window at the shrinking city below and suddenly thought of myself 30 years ago, standing on that train platform, watching David leave for college. Back then, I thought there was nothing more painful than being separated from my child. Now, I understand that physical distance has nothing to do with the closeness of the heart. The flight attendant brought me a drink. I took a sip and looked at the itinerary for the cultural exchange. In the next 2 weeks, I would be demonstrating American home cooking in Osaka, Kyoto, and Tokyo, as well as learning about traditional Japanese and Korean cuisine. Mr. Peterson had even bought me a nice camera, telling me to take lots of pictures to show everyone back home. Outside the window, the sea of clouds stretched out like endless cotton, bathed in brilliant sunlight. I closed my eyes, soaking in the peace. Whatever lay ahead, at least in this moment, I was free. I was my own person. I was Helen. A year later, on Thanksgiving, the yard of my old house was filled with lights and laughter. More than 20 seniors from the community who would have otherwise been alone sat around a long table, a grand Thanksgiving feast spread before them. Helen, this turkey is the best I've ever had, 80-year-old Mr. Liu said, giving me a thumbs up. Have some more, I said, giving him another slice of breast meat. There's plenty for everyone today. In the kitchen, David was clumsily chopping cucumbers, with Leo acting as his supervisor. Daddy, Grandma says you have to slice them diagonally. I know, David said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Go see if your mommy has set the table yet. I walked over and took the knife from my son's hand. Let me do it. You go spend some time with Jessica. David gave me a grateful smile and whispered, Mom, thank you for giving her another chance. I shook my head. We're family. Yes, Jessica was back. During my trip to Japan, David had messaged me almost every day, telling me about his reflections and his remorse. The day I came back, he picked me up from the airport alone and told me he and Jessica had divorced. I've thought it through, Mom, he said in the car. Jessica and I had problems long before all of this. We wouldn't have lasted anyway. I didn't comment, just asked. And Leo? He's with me, David said. Jessica can visit on weekends. I thought that was the end of it. But 3 months later, Jessica showed up at my door to apologize. A sincere apology, with no calculations, no pretense. It turned out that after the divorce, she had gone to live with her parents, and her father, my never-before-seen in-law, had given her a stern lecture. My dad. He said he didn't raise me right, Jessica had told me, her eyes red. He said, a mother-in-law like you is a blessing that most people can only dream of. I poured her a cup of tea and listened as she talked about her upbringing, her vanity, her regrets. Finally, she asked if I could give her another chance, not for the money, not for the house, but simply because she wanted to make amends. Mom, I know you probably don't believe me, she had cried, but I truly know I was wrong. I didn't agree right away. Instead, I gave her a test. Work at the bistro for a month, without pay, starting with the dirtiest and hardest jobs. To my surprise, she stuck it out. She even went out of her way to take care of the elderly patrons who came to eat. Grandma, Leo saw me and ran over. I made 10 dinner rolls. That's amazing. I kissed his cheek. Go help Auntie Brenda with the pies. Mr. Peterson was taking pictures everywhere, saying he was going to put them in the senior center's newsletter. Carol and Art were holding hands in a corner, like a young couple. Emma was even there. She now came to visit for a month every year, saying she needed to recharge. Helen, she called out in her charmingly accented English. This stuffing, it is magic. I smiled and went over to show her how to mix it. She was a diligent student, even if her technique was a bit clumsy. Halfway through dinner, the town mayor stood up to give a speech. I'd like to thank Helen Miller and her family for their care for the lonely seniors in our community this past year. Not only has Helen's Kitchen provided a free weekly lunch for our seniors, but she has also organized this wonderful Thanksgiving dinner for everyone. Everyone applauded loudly. David lowered his head in embarrassment, while Jessica blushed and tried to hide behind me. I stood up and raised my teacup. It's my pleasure. We seniors have to look out for each other. After dinner, everyone gathered around the TV to watch the holiday specials. Leo was so tired he was nodding off, but he insisted on staying up. Jessica held him in her arms, humming softly. David sat next to me, refilling my tea from time to time. Mom, David whispered during a commercial break, I got a promotion. Really? I looked at him, surprised. Why didn't you say so sooner? I wanted to surprise you, David smiled shyly. Project director. It came with a nice raise. I patted his hand. That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you, and… David hesitated. Jessica and I were thinking of getting remarried. I looked over at Jessica. She was gently stroking a sleeping Leo, her expression much softer than before, without the sharp edges of the past. As long as you've both thought it through, I said softly. You have my blessing. As the clock struck midnight, everyone stood up to wish each other a happy new year in spirit, even if it was Thanksgiving. Leo woke up with a start, jumping up and down and asking for his holiday gift. I had prepared a small gift for everyone, including Emma and Brenda. Grandma, Leo whispered in my ear, when I grow up, I want to be like you and help people. I held him tight, my eyes welling up. All the trials and tribulations of the past year, the arguments, the tears, the confrontations, it was all worth it for this one moment. Outside, fireworks lit up the night sky, illuminating the yard of the old house and every happy face within it. David and Jessica stood on either side of me. Leo was in my arms, and my friends were all around me. This was my family, my life, the fulfillment that my own choices had brought me. At 69 years old, Helen Miller had finally found her own perfect happiness.